Corsair, our non-stimulant, thermogenic, and recomposition agent. Corsair is a super cool product because it's gonna help you utilize turning your white adipose tissue, which is for storage of fat, into brown adipose tissue, which is gonna help with energy production. So this is great to use for a competition prep or in your weight loss phase. So you can stack it with a stimulant-based thermogenic, or you could also use it in your off-season or muscle building phase to help keep you lean and mean. Corsair.
Steven's got nothing for us, and now I have to edit out my weird, awkward silence because I banked on the fact that he was going to run with that.
What, you want me to talk about erotic Jabba the Hutt?
There we go. Thank you.
Steven feels very chill though today. I feel like chill vibes.
I'm medicated again.
Oh,
We'll see how long that lasts, depending on if there's medication in stock. But at least for the time being,
Yeah.
the medicine is in my veins.
Are you
and
only able to get a month?
Yeah. So because the stimulants for ADHD are a class 1 narcotic, essentially, because it's amphetamines, you can only get a certain amount of the time. And then most of the time when you go for your refill because you're about out, because you can't get the refill done early either. It has to be within a few days. Then they'll be out, and then you end up getting like boned on that one. So it's semi-annoying at this point, and expensive too, because they don't have a lot of the generics at this point.
Yeah.
They tend to be out of those more. So if you can get something, it's normally the name brand, which is like significantly more expensive.
Yeah.
yeah, you were saying that on another podcast about the name and the name brand versus like generic. But
Yeah, like
Yeah.
$400 versus $15.
yeah, it's like
When I tried to fill
insanity.
Rikers, it was $750 for generic Concerta. And I was like, okay, well, no thanks. And then I just talked to a client this morning, actually, who sent in a thing, and she was like apologizing, where she was like, I feel like I just have a lot of excuses, but they keep giving me 3 or 4 days of my medication, and then I have to wait a week, and then they give, like, that's all they have for her. And
Ugh.
she was saying with her ADHD and how the meds help her, it's not just a matter of like, can she sit down and focus at work, but it's like a mood control thing. It's,
Mhm.
and there's so much. And she was like, I know I probably just come off like this loser. And I'm like, no, if you were on liver medication that kept your body functioning correctly, and then they wouldn't give it to you anymore, nobody would be mad because your enzymes were elevated or something.
Yeah.
Like, your brain works differently. You don't have the support you need. And so we need to, like, and that's where, our routines and our habits come into play, so it doesn't turn into like a complete shit show. And we can like lean on stuff a little bit for what works, but like, don't beat yourself up. But this is just crazy. We're picking new health insurance right now with Vic's new job. And it's been interesting kind of going through the different companies. And that specifically has been what I've been researching, is how are they handling like this stuff? Because it's just been,
I mean, like it's real deal, because it's one of the things that Jillian had changed her health insurance, because we're still on 2 different policies right now, and they had like double charged her for like her old policy that wasn't supposed to exist anymore, and then a new one, or blah blah whatever. And so she canceled one, but it was the wrong one to cancel. So now she's stuck with that one, but they only cover like 50% of prescriptions until she hits like out of pocket and deductible, which is, the deductible is like $5,600 and out of pocket's like $8,000. So it's like, it really almost doesn't even do her any good at that point. So that's why, like, you have to be able to, like, for those of you who are struggling here, go look at like online. There are still a lot of like coupons that you can still find to make it better. But like Concerta is super crazy expensive, even the generics.
right.
This podcast will be entitled "What We're Going to Talk About," with a tidbit on ADHD medication and insurance.
Right. Hey, we're here
but you
for a
do- you have to-
lifestyle, right?
Yeah, but and so say whatever it is that affects you, right? So whether it's your ADHD medication, whether it's like depression or anxiety or whatever, like you deal with, you need to be aware of what that insurance is going to actually cover, how they classify the medications, what they cover for that, and like what makes sense for you. And that stuff's not, it's not like easy stuff. Like, you don't figure that out by just like knowing it. Nobody teaches you that. Most of us figured that out because we got screwed. And we're like, oh my God, why is this so expensive? And then you learned.
Yeah. 100%. So we're just trying to teach everybody a little bit of everything. So you will learn something by listening to our podcast. Sometimes it might be that Denver has seductive Jabba the Hutt shows. We found that out
Yeah.
today. So,
Or that I play myself in the background.
right. With the hands too. That's
Just
what's
leave
good.
it right there.
Is
Nothing
there-
more.
That's it. Okay, so the actual topic for today is going to be mini cuts and everything we can think of to talk about them. So essentially, well, and until like within limit. So mini cut is like a quick and dirty diet for the most part. And I'm not a huge fan. I think that like for clients that I've used that with, I feel like a lot of times the success rate is not worth where we end up with stuff. And then there's very few people who are actually in a situation where they would benefit from like a real mean cut that only lasts a short period of time. Because I feel like a lot of times when people bring these up, it's because they have an event and they're like, couldn't we just do a mini cut? And it's like, well, yeah, technically I could starve you for a month, but then you're going to go on that vacation in Costa Rica and you're going to come back real pissed when you gained everything. And so like, there's still a lot of things we want to think about. It's not just, hey, I've got 4 weeks, let's diet, you know? And so
Yeah.
with your face, Stephen, what would you,
Boo.
what is your face
Boo.
brought me to you or drew me to you? How would you explain a diet or a mini cut to someone?
So I think that the general thing that it used to be was just you would do a cut for a short amount of time because you wanted to tighten up a little bit or whatever, which sure, vanity, great. I get it. I'm pretty vain. You know, I have to, you know, have my hair just like so. I only like it when one person cuts it. You know, everybody else does a crap job and then I look stupid and it makes me mad for like a month. But I think more and more it's been more aggressive short-term stuff. Like ever since Dr. Campbell and them did that aggressive fat loss study, where they really cut calories hard. It's like,
And it was for like 8 weeks, wasn't it?
I don't think it was. Maybe it was for 8 weeks.
Or
I
was
thought
it
was
for like
shorter.
shorter? I thought it
Yeah.
was real short.
I thought it was like 4 weeks at most.
4?
Um,
But
I
Lauren
don't have
was
the
on.
study in front of me, but you know,
I'll look it up.
Yeah.
You continue to talk.
yeah, look it up. Let's get some facts. Everybody else is like, no, it's 4 days. No, it's 8. Like, no, you didn't listen long enough. Jessica actually told us after the fact.
Yeah.
But essentially what they saw was that, okay, you could diet real aggressively, not really have much muscle loss, not really have any impact on metabolic rate, probably see some progress, and then come back out of it and be all hunky-dory. But, and so we will, it's funny because like we give shit to research like all the time in one way or another. And so normally we give research shit because they're like, oh, well, this was the population. So really? But in this case, the population was like mostly college students because I've recruited and helped recruit for those studies. Like you go to the rec center, you put up and sit at a table. You're like, hey, we'll give you a free scoop of protein after, you know, after your workouts and do this if you want to be part of a research study. And so most of those people were probably like kids in their 20s, people with really, you know, fairly healthy metabolisms, and people that were really maybe a bit more on it with their diet stuff. So I think that's a big one. But I find most people who want to do the mini cuts, they want to do it for an event. They want to do it for a life thing, but there's always a life thing coming up. So then it becomes this consistent thing of, oh, I want to cut for this. Oh, I want to cut for that. Oh, I want to cut for this. And then you just essentially, you're like, you get like 4 weeks of not dieting, quote unquote, and then 4 weeks of a diet. And then it's just this back and forth. So for me, I'm like, I would much rather that we just, if we're going to diet, let's fucking diet. Like, let's do it. That way we can be less aggressive. It can be more maintainable. We can hopefully manage weight rebound as opposed to like doing the really aggressive short-term diet, most likely having weight rebound. And then oftentimes I find people don't do that well with them. Now, it could be because they're not actually hitting those numbers, because going from a higher calorie intake to a really aggressive approach overnight is not easy. Like you're not just going to feel good. So I think most people tend to overeat with that and don't actually hit the more aggressive numbers that you would expect them to. And so I also find that they don't really make that much progress a lot of the times with those like really aggressive short-term diets. at least not what you would expect. So it's not like I don't want to be like, no, they're the worst thing ever. I think they have their place, but I think that place is extremely limited, and I think way too many people try and overutilize the idea of a mini cut when really what we probably need to be looking at is the long-term and overall habit change and formation to help us be in a place where we're more comfortable
Right.
long-term. And that could also even be like the mentality and how we see ourselves. Fuck, that was long-winded. I'm sorry. Did I give you enough time to look it up though, Jess? That's the real question.
I found a bunch of podcasts on it, but I couldn't find the actual study. And so I don't know how long it was, but basically it was very short term. I bet Steven can probably find it now. It was super short term, and you're right. Like they saw results, like there were results in the 4 weeks. Let's say that it is. But the issue was not necessarily adherence, but that's because they had people like Lauren Conlon, who was part of the who was part of the study, and she is a bikini competitor.
50.
What? Did you find it?
No, I was hoping that maybe they would have put it in the blurb of a YouTube video that I found, but when I clicked the video, it started playing.
Oh, yeah, I know. I didn't want to like click on the YouTubes because I was like, it's gonna play.
Right. And I'm like, I know it's in there.
Yeah. So you know, the participants in the story or in the study, I think, you know, were kind of high functioning, high operator situations. But then also they found that the rebound was really, really tough. Like it was just really, really hard to get back to. Steven, what's up?
Did you find it?
Oh no, he's shaking his head. So
Oh, I'm gonna find it. I'm just gonna be quiet till I do.
okay, cool. So like my issue with the mini cut, and like Steven touched on this, is what do you want to achieve? Like there's the scenario of, well, I just want to tighten up for this vacation, which is a fair and valuable goal. But the fact is like, is that happening every 6 months? And then we need to look at, number one, why do we feel like we need to diet for every vacation? And number two, are you just continuously dieting? Like just yo-yoing? And so there's like that mental factor, but then there's like that physical health factor of like, now you're just continuing to down-regulate your metabolism and eat less and do more time and time and time again, and expecting a different result. And it's not getting you where you want to be. I leave for Mexico on Friday and I am the heaviest that I've ever been. So like I haven't dieted. My plan is to not diet, especially if I'm leaving in 2 days. But like, I think you need to look at why you feel like you need to look a certain way for the vacation or the wedding or the holiday or the trip or the birthday or whatever. And then look at what kind of strategies have you tried to result in the past. And I mean, there can be, and then Steven touched on the other thing is like, what is a mini cut? Because if we're talking about 4 weeks versus 10 to 12 weeks, which could also just be a like longer cut, mini cut, like a longer
Like a
mini
longer
cut, like,
mini cut, because it's
right?
not really long enough for a real, like,
yeah.
I probably want longer.
Like how much progress are you wanting to hit? Like how much do you think that you're going to actually lose in 4 weeks? Like realistically. And I'll use Bob as an example because he's been cutting since January. Okay. So it's been like 3 months and we have 2 weeks leading up to Mexico. And he's like, do you think that I should keep cutting or do you think I should start reverse dieting? And my question to him was, well, what do you want to achieve more in the next 2 weeks? Like, how much more do you want to achieve? Or is it just worth it to you to start reversing and start eating a little bit more? Like, how are you doing mentally? Right. So it was like more of like that conversation. Because what are you wanting to lose in 4 weeks? Because you see, and the issue is also like we see in like magazines and social media and celebrities and Instagram, like, oh my God, lose 20 pounds in 4 weeks or something absolutely ridiculous. And it's like, is that actually realistic? Are they just fucking lying? Like, it's probably not going to happen. And if it does, you're probably going to feel like shit. And then you're going to go on vacation and eat all the things and gain it all back and then hate yourself.
Right. Well, it's like, so when I was still in the Navy, people were nonstop using those, the wraps. Oh God, was it called like Wrap It? Or like there was some sort of name where you would
Oh,
go.
the body wraps, the weight
Yeah.
loss wraps.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so old
so
school.
they would do that, like, so like we would have PRTs twice a year. And so everyone knew when they were coming, like your command would have like, this is the month that we do them. So it was no secret when you were going to have to weigh in and be ready for stuff. And people would always wait to start until they were like 2 to 3 weeks out with stuff. They would slash calories and then go do these wraps and everything. And within, I don't know, 72 hours of getting weighed in, if even that long, everything would have come back on because, you know, they've already gone to the Taco Bell drive-through and they have their giant like Baja Blast or whatever and smoked 7 cigarettes and we're back to not caring about this shit anymore. And I think the biggest part that makes me the most nervous with things like mini cuts is what Steven laid out, where it's like, okay, so we're going to Florida at the end of April. So I'm just going to do a mini cut from today until right up to April. And then they come home, they're home for 3 weeks. And it's like, oh, I've got this other thing in 3 weeks. And so let's just do that. And then now we're living at like sad calorie land. And it's the comment, the one that always kills me in these situations is when they'll be like, I always do this. I always diet down aggressively to, whatever magical number is their vacation number that they're allowed to weigh when they get on the airplane. And, they just crash diet there and back. And it's like, well, have we gotten to live in that place yet? Have we gotten to see what it does take to extensively be there? Do we want to? Because to Jess's point, where it's like, what are we really going to accomplish in that time? Unless you have massive amounts of weight to lose, I'm talking like 50 plus pounds. If you're like, oh, I'm just going to diet down for like 4 pounds to come off or something like that in this mini cut, like we talked about with the aggressive calories, it's going to hurt. Like you're going to feel it. It's not going to be like a slight shift in your stuff where maybe we're pulling like one snack or we're slightly adjusting stuff. Mini cut calories are real mean. Like the idea is that, because sometimes like when I'm dieting clients, I'll tell them like, it's not abnormal for it to take 10 to 14 days for your body to even catch on to what we're doing, or for us to get to see the results of it. I might not see any shift on the scale or measurements for 2 to 3 weeks sometimes with somebody. And in a diet cut or in a mini cut, you're done. Like that's it. But now we eat 1,200 calories a day. And you can't just all of a sudden bump back up necessarily. Like there might be some people who can get away with going straight back to maintenance and not put weight on. But in all reality, now like your reverse diet is not going to be a mini reverse diet just because you did a mini cut. Like it is going to go probably the same pace that another one would. And now it's just like, we're just digging this hole and not climbing out of it at any point is where I get nervous.
I don't know about you guys, but I'm a little neurotic about my sleep. And we all know in order to feel our best, build muscle, lose body fat, sleep is a big part of it. When I started incorporating cured nightcaps as part of my wind down routine, it truly changed the game in terms of having a good night's quality sleep and waking up feeling refreshed. The thing that makes the nightcap stand out isn't the already properly dosed CBD to help with general aches, discomfort, and mood, but it's the added CBN that takes this product to the next level. CBN supports your body's natural sleep rhythms throughout the night for deep restorative sleep that leaves you feeling ready to take on anything the next day. No grogginess or harsh side effects. I like to take these nightcaps with me when I'm traveling or if I'm experiencing higher stress than normal. Pairing the nightcaps with either Zen or a few drops of one of their CBD oils really hits the spot. Making sure to check out all of Cured's amazing products online. Use the code, all one word, for a discount at checkout.
Yeah. So, by the way, I don't think I could find the right study. I found the one where they did like 25% energy restriction. So like they cut calories by 25%, but they still had the refeeds. And I don't believe that's the correct one because that one was 7 weeks. So that may have been the one you were thinking of though, Jess.
Yeah.
But this one was short. And so like,
I thought
what
it
you
was like
should
2
see.
weeks. There was one that was like 2 weeks and like 60 carbs or something like that, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
it was like 2 or 4 weeks. It was a month or less, and it was a real like because a 25% energy reduction is not crazy by any means. Like that, I would say for a lot of people, that's like their normal go-to to start a diet. Like, okay, cool, we're gonna reduce energy by 25%. But if you're at 4,000 calories a day maintaining weight, that's 1,000 calorie hit. That's like,
Right.
so maybe it's a little bit different if you're maintaining weight at 1,800 calories a day, right? So it becomes more emphatic the higher your calorie intake is. But what they saw was, it wasn't an issue. They could go back to maintenance. I think the problem is when they do those short-term, really aggressive diets, they don't just go back to their maintenance calories. Like they're not doing that on the trips. They're normally bypassing that. So it's not like you're like, okay, I did a little mini cut. I'm on my trip. I'm counting. I'm making sure I'm getting my workouts in. I'm doing my cardio, blah, blah, or whatever it takes for me to maintain weight normally. It's like, okay, I had a few drinks a day. I was at the bar. I was by the pool. I didn't get any, like, now it's this huge shift from what you normally would be and would be maintenance into what is most likely going to be a pretty substantial, like, calorie surplus. And so even though you may or may not, and this would be individually dependent, as far as I can tell, in my limited experience in life and this, what we do coaching here, everybody's different, right? So like I might be able to get away with that, but somebody else might not. I might be able to do a mini cut and be able to go right back to my macros. Somebody else might not. And so and I would say the higher likelihood that you're not going to be able to get away with that is if you have more dieting history.
Right.
The more that you dieted, the less likely you are to just bounce back. And again, that's why I was like, a lot of times we give them shit about not having great people in the studies, but it might not be quite fair for somebody that's, had kids and in their 50s or 60s to expect that their body is going to do the same thing as a 21-year-old college kid.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
and I think and that's where the like desire to do a mini cut can come from a lot, is like the FOMO or well, this person's doing it, so I want to do it too, or well, my friends are going to be like, right? Like I see that a lot, especially with competitors. Like if we're talking about like a mini cut, like in an off season or something like that, which is a whole other topic, but what
What does it say?
because I have body dysmorphia practice. And so like there's like this comparison with others, or just like, well, my friend's doing a cut, so I want to do it too,
Yeah.
kind of thing. And it honestly comes down to like, what is your ultimate goal? Like what is your ultimate goal? If your ultimate goal is to lose 50, 60 pounds eventually, how is taking 4 weeks and doing something extreme like that going to help you in the end get there? And like it might to some degree, but the repercussions of the extreme of a mini cut just aren't worth it for me. And in terms of like me coaching, like there might be like an athletic reason why like you're cutting weight for something or whatever, but again,
Yes.
yeah, which we can talk about, but like ultimate goal, what is your ultimate goal? Because if it's to lose 50, 60 pounds, even 20 pounds, even 10 pounds, I would say no, it's probably not a good goal for you, especially taking into account your dieting history. And like if you're a competitor and you're in the middle of an off season, but you want to prep in 6 months, doing a money cut is also probably going to be a terrible idea for you, because wouldn't you just rather take those 4 weeks and continue to build muscle? I mean,
No, I don't want to do that at all.
well, I do.
I feel like the mini cut does end up being like you said, the social cutting experiment, where it's like, well, I'm not fully committing to like a 4-month cut or like this big thing. And it's like, well, my friend's doing it and it's not going to be that big of a deal, like is the way people look at them. But I would almost rather look at mini cuts instead of looking at the timeline, which I feel like sometimes it's nice to have that timeline because they're so aggressive. So if we're going to take somebody who's chilling at like, 200 carb or something, and then they want to try something similar to the Bill Campbell thing, and then all of a sudden we're taking them down to 60. So like their breakfast is the only carbs that they have left. With that, then it's nice to put a timeline on it because it's like, we're absolutely not doing this longer than 3 weeks, and then we're done.
Side note, that's 60 total carbs, not 60 net carbs. That's not like 60 carbs of rice cakes and other
Right.
stuff, and then all the veggies that you want. That is
Right.
60 carbs,
All
period.
in.
Yeah. And
Done.
you start looking at your asparagus and you're like, excuse me, why do you have so many carbs in you? Like things like that, because you start to notice you're like, broccoli's a little high. Potatoes and things like that come out. And I'd rather almost look at it as like the amount of weight, right? Where like if we're looking to just do like a tiny tightening up thing, it's going to come with like a much different conversation with somebody. Because I feel like mini cuts, it's almost weight you're going to lose that you're not going to keep off. Like, if you have something and you need to fit into that dress and it's like a wedding and we ran out of time, or maybe you did it last minute, ordered it wrong or whatever, and you understand that you're going to go and you're going to have a good time, but you just really don't want to feel like a sausage or something, we're going to have a conversation about how we should have planned better. Maybe that's like the only time, because I'm going to tell them like the reality of us keeping everything off that we lose in this is probably kind of low. Like if I've never taken somebody from 200 to 60, by the way, like that dramatic one. I haven't done that. I don't know if you guys have tried it yet, but like I haven't.
I absolutely have.
But
it was more so to prove a point.
I did it with Paul when this came out. It was right before, it was 2018. I remember when it started like making the rounds and I was in a decent enough spot and it worked. I remember I probably took off like 7 or 8 pounds, but we wound up pushing it to closer to a month because I was doing okay. And we were talking about feedback and I kept being like, okay, let's just do one more week. And then I was like, fuck this. I don't like it anymore.
Well, I think another important question here is how long did you have off from dieting before you did that?
Right.
Yeah.
Because and I think this is one of the other things where people tend to get just do themselves a disservice is that, okay, oops, we effed up on the reverse diet. Okay, sure, it happens, but that means we have to control that. But I don't want to, continue to do the reverse diet now because I'm uncomfortable and because weight came on too quick and, we didn't control it or didn't plan or whatever the case might be, had these events and just chose to enjoy. And now we've put on more weight. Now is when the mini cut comes in. And that's normally when if I've had that request in the past, that's when it comes up. I'll be honest, I have not had a mini cut conversation with somebody in probably 2 years at least.
Yeah.
I haven't had anybody even ask. But normally what I found the biggest issue was it was people that were not too long post show and they're like, oh, I'm uncomfortable now. I want to diet again. And I'm like, absolutely not. Because at that point, your aggressive mini cut is just right back to what you were doing and what had already like facilitated the same kind of probable and possible like adaptations metabolically and them not feeling good and all the other stuff.
Yeah.
And then that's just like, because you haven't had enough time to actually recover from that at that point. So you're still in this spot where you're not recovered from your diet. Yes, you're at a higher body fat than maybe you want to be, but you're not in the same kind of place as somebody who's not been dieting for a year plus, where they haven't had the calorie restriction, they haven't had the hours of cardio, they haven't had all the other aggressive stuff, and they're in a much better spot with a much higher likelihood to respond appropriately and positively to that versus us who maybe things just got away from us.
Yeah. Well, and in those instances, and like, I've had a client who had surgery and we took some time away from like tracking religiously and that type of thing and just working on like some meal guidelines and stuff like that. And she has some very exciting things coming up at the end of April and all of a sudden was like, well, can we cut? And I went, well, I think that you just starting to track again and hitting steps and spacing your meals out appropriately and getting back into training again and improving your intensity in the gym and just like working on that, that's probably going to actually maybe not necessarily lose body weight on the scale, but you're going to start to feel better. You're probably going to lower inflammation. You're probably going to start sleeping better. You're probably going to have good digestion. You're going to have good bowel movement. So like that's going to be happening again. You're going to be better hydrated. You're going to be improved. So I find in some of these instances, it's just a matter of, hey, let's just get on to a good routine again. Like in a post, like I blew my reverse kind of situation, we have to kind of sit in that and go, hey, let's shift our goals from something that is more weight related to more health performance maybe related in the meantime. And that in itself can improve your composition. Cause like we're saying, yeah, this 4-week mini cut, if that's what we're kind of hypothesizing around, you're going to see progress in terms of maybe weight loss. I'd be so interested to hear like, well, Christina, if she lost like 8 pounds, was that really reflective in her physical physique, right? Because sometimes we just feel like depleted and then you don't have the pop to your muscles anymore. You feel
If you
tired.
have enough muscles. That's if you have
right.
enough
And
muscle.
also that, right? Like even if you have enough muscle in the first place to have any pop, you're going to be depleted. Oh my God. Depleted. I was going to say deflated. And
That's when you're sad about it. You're depleted.
Right. And you're going to be tired. You're going to be drawn out. It's like the competitors that you see do extreme things to get to stage and you see them on stage don't look as good as the individuals who had like a chill peak week, were drinking water, not doing these like insane things to get to stage, and they actually look a little bit healthy and they have a little bit more vibrancy to their skin, blah, blah, blah. Right. So
I like to put my water for show day in tequila bottles so that people just see me drinking that backstage.
I love that. And you should put all your
Suckers.
snacks into like, I don't know, like a mayo container or something. And you're like, it totally works. I don't know about you.
Just like, I'm done. I'm done with you, Steven.
I think she's sick of us.
I have a like pest control person coming to my house. Like to like
I'm at my
spray.
house. That's gonna do you no good.
But to like spray and stuff. So Bob's trying to like handle Guinness, who's having a conniption. So I'm like half like being drawn to that.
Do you
Oh, yeah.
have, what kind
I
of
know that
doors?
life.
Weird question. Jess, what kind of doors can you see Bob?
Currently, no.
Because you've done that before where he's walked by and you're like, hi. And I've always wondered what your setup was. We have to do like a tour one day.
So
like,
I'm like in our upstairs bonus room, which is like, well, it's just open and the stairway is there and his line to his office is there and our bedroom hallway is there. So like if he goes up and downstairs, he like walks across my vision, but you can't see him.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Well, today's one of those podcasts having to run away or see crazy things.
I know, right?
But yeah,
anyways.
So back to
depleted.
prior, I think it's also like, it was the same reason why everybody loved keto, right? They're like, oh yeah, lose 10 pounds in 10 days. But when you do those really aggressive things, you just like, there are simple reasons why you're going to weigh less. One, you're probably going to have way less in your digestive system. So there's going to be less weight there. You're going to be eating less. So you're going to have less in the, like in your system when you go to weigh in. You're probably going to be somewhat dehydrated if you didn't, update sodium intake or change how much sodium you were getting for everything. You're probably going to be at least somewhat flat and depleted from glycogen, which is going to have another impact in terms of your water weight and your water retention stuff. So when you do those really aggressive diets, and maybe, yeah, it is 7 to 10 pounds that you get off, is all of that 7 to 10 pounds actually body fat loss? And well, probably not.
Right.
Is what I'm going to say. And so like we said earlier, if you're a combat sports athlete and you just need to make weight, who cares? You just need to make weight. But I'll be honest, the guys at the top level doing that, I was looking at weight cut numbers before, and they're cutting like 30% of their body weight to make weight, a lot of them. So they are coming into the fight like 20, 30 pounds heavier a lot of times. It is wild how
Like
much.
the next day.
Yes.
Yeah, like they do all of their like water cut stuff and then they weigh in and then their goal is to get back to weight, right?
Right. So the goal is to make weight. That's the big thing. Once that's done, you can do whatever you want. You just have to make sure that you don't throw up during the fight or the match, whatever. So as long as you make weight, it doesn't matter what you weigh on the actual day. Powerlifting was the same way. So like USAPL had 2-hour weigh-ins. So you couldn't really goof around with it too much there. Otherwise, you had terrible performance. Most of the fight sports went to the 24-hour head weigh-ins because of like CTE and brain injuries, because you didn't have enough fluid in your head to actually help prevent against brain damage. So they're like, well, we got to do 24-hour weigh-ins. But it also still like benefits you because then you can cut 20, 25, 30 pounds, however much, to make weight. And then you're fighting in this 150-pound weight class. But realistically, when you're actually fighting, you're like 174. You know what I mean? And so once they make weight, it's Pedialyte, it's Gatorade. It's like they might IV, they might do anything, but they do crazy shit to cut all that water weight. And that's a completely different thing and super unhealthy to do all that dehydration. So if you can maybe do a little bit of aggressive diet, and they're all aggressively dieting by that point out, by the way, also. So they're all doing this shit. At least as far as I've seen, at the really high level, they're doing the aggressive weight loss protocols in conjunction with the water stuff. So it's for them, yeah, it might be what you have to do. But you could also try and see if you could be more competitive in a more natural weight class to where you maybe don't have to do something as aggressive for your weight cuts, because it's definitely terrible for your health. It's definitely terrible for your dieting history and stuff. Because there's a couple people that, like, when I hear histories, I'm like, this is going to be tough. So like dancers and gymnasts are some of them.
Yeah.
And then wrestlers and anybody who has done any kind of like competitive, I have to make weight stuff, especially because in high school, people do it all the time. And it just kind of sets them up to continue doing that if they do it throughout college, or if they're really good and can still do it after that.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah. And those
I mean-
water cuts can be nerve-wracking. Like, because I feel like once people have done them, they become like well, I know how this works and like kind of thing. But you feel like absolute dog shit. Like, honestly, it'd be so interesting to see a lot of those people perform without having to do that. Like the same like the same pairings and stuff. And just be like, we don't actually give a fuck what you weigh. Go fight each other and like see how it goes like differently, and like not have them do that stuff. Because I did a water cut for a powerlifting meet a million years ago, and I didn't even have to take off that much. And I remember like sitting in the sauna and like spitting and like stuff like that, because I was so nervous I wasn't going to be like close enough. And it's crazy pants. But then, like you said, when you have people who have done that, like it's been a part of their history, then that kind of becomes a part of their normal stuff too, where it's not just, oh, I do it for meets. It's doing it for like little things that pop up and it accumulates. The wrestlers, like that's one where you always like, I've
God love you all, by the way.
huh?
I love the wrestlers, by the way. They're
Okay.
normally very easy guillotines.
Well, they're gonna get shit done, right? And that's the thing about a lot of people who have been in these situations because of past like sports histories and stuff like that. You could tell them to do it twice as long, and they're like, if you say it's gonna work, like, they're just gonna be game for it. So they're very hard workers, but sometimes being down for that kind of crazy, you have to be like, wait a minute. Like, life doesn't always have to be extreme.
Yeah. And it, like, especially so as an amateur person who does fight sports and grappling, you don't have to be that aggressive with your weight cuts and stuff to still be competitive and still make it. I've done it, right? Like, I made sure that I made weight for the Arnold and I was pretty close to cap, but we were good. I did it for my last tournament and I was like, I was pretty lean anyways, because I would think I was under the 175 for that one. I was definitely the leanest guy in that tournament. But like, yeah, I cleaned up pretty well. But I made weight at like, I think just under 175, and I actually weighed in the next day at like 178. So it wasn't this huge shift. I have done powerlifting meets where I cut down to like 176 water cut, so maybe 5 pounds. And then the next day, because I really went heavy, I was like 194.
Oh
Yeah.
gosh.
I think I was like Gatorades and
You so
Pedialytes.
puffy?
And like, oh, I was so puffy. It was great. And like large anchovy pizzas, like with extra salt added and all this other nasty crap. I was just like, yeah, blow me out, baby. That was the biggest one. I felt strong, but not great.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, if we're probably talking to a lot of like not this population, you know, like if that's you and you're doing water cut for a fight or whatever, cool. I mean, within reason.
Maybe it's still not that cool.
No, like cool to do it for that, and like, I don't know. Anyways,
I still don't love it, even for the fighters in the weight class. I'll be honest. I just don't think it's a good practice.
No, and it's the same thing with like cutting water for stage and that kind of craziness. But for the majority of the people that we're talking to, it's either lifestyle people who are wanting to cut for a vacation, or a competitor who has blown their reverse, or just feel a little puffy in the off season. And at the end of the day, and like I kind of circle back to like, what is your ultimate goal? At the end of the day, does the number on the scale matter? And the majority of the time, it doesn't. And if it does, then I would ask you why. Why does a certain number on the scale matter to you? Because sometimes it does. And I'm not saying that you're like that number isn't a valid number, or that you feeling like that number, you know, like your feelings are valid. But like, why? Because I have been there when I've boxed myself in mentally for a number on the scale, and it simply did me a disservice. Like, it did me an absolute disservice. Does it really matter to you that you're going to, and like, even for my wedding, when I was 24, I had to weigh 120. 120 was like the number. And like, I remember like 2 weeks prior to my wedding, I was at 121 or something like that. Like, you could poop and you're 120. So like,
here's my real question with that. When you got to the altar, was Bob immediately like, how much do you weigh, babe?
Yeah.
And then when you said like 120, he was like, okay, we can do this.
Proceed.
okay, that's acceptable.
Carry on.
That's fine. Right. And it's funny because like, transparency, I weigh 30 pounds more than that right now. So like, why does the number matter? Because it might, but like, really, it probably doesn't. It probably matters more about how you physically feel, right? Because like, Stephen, you were saying, yeah, you were strong, you performed really well, but like, I felt also like ass. Right. And is it how you
like
feel?
the big marshmallow man guy from Ghostbusters, when he was just like trouncing around the city? He was like, ah, look at me. I think that was my vibe. You know, that's how I felt, which is not fair. But
That's like what I pictured.
That's what my little ADHD imagination was like. I was like, yeah, I'm so big and strong. Look at me, Ghostbusters. You ain't gonna get this.
But did you have the cheeky little cap that he wears too?
I wish.
And doesn't he have a little like ascot? What is that called? The little thing he. Never mind.
Oh, like the thing that Fred from Scooby-Doo wears?
It is an
yeah.
ascot. Okay.
Yeah.
I thought I was making up words over here. Nope, just had secret ones in my brain. Didn't know if it was
I
right.
think it's because the guy who invented them was named Scott, and he was an absolute ass.
An ascot.
So they just ran with that. That's not true at all, probably.
Guess it's gonna run
No,
out
they
of all
no, that's not
patience
true.
by the end of the
My eye
podcast.
roll, I was like, okay.
This is what Deraja hates. She's like, Steven, you just say it so confidently, and you're like, I feel like that's not true, but it also very well could be.
See, tone matters. I think a lot of times the scale, like, and having that number, because anytime, so I haven't had competitors ask me about mini cuts in a really long time, but I have had lifestyle people for the same reasons of like a fucked up reverse, or like, oh, now I've hit a scary number. And like, yes, I want to be strong, but also could we get back to the not scary number? And they want to like get back there as quick as they can. And I like literally the only reason that has control over us has got to be because we need to have a way that we can size up ourselves like against others, and like, are we being successful or are they? That's the only reason a number would matter, especially if it comes from people when like they had never been that number, right? Like for my wedding, mine was 130. That was where I wanted to be. Mind you, I was chilling at like 145. So like it was crazy. And 130 was not a number I had ever been at in my adult life. Like that wasn't something I grew past that number as a child and then never saw it again, but was like, my value is nothing. And people are going to show up to my wedding and be like, this is a sham if I don't weigh that much. And they're going to think it's a waste. And it's so stupid, but it was literally only because I knew other people that I thought looked good weighed something around there. And like one of the coolest things that's happened with just knowing more bodybuilders and like people in our industry and stuff is finding out that some of those people who like compete and stuff, like where they get in their off seasons. And I think a lot of people wouldn't expect that. And so like when wellness got popular and like first like became a thing and people started talking about it more, I remember I had clients that they would have the pictures of them shredded and be like, well, I think I'm a wellness person and this is what I should do and stuff. And I would send them their off season pictures. And I was like, look at these women and where they get to and what they do with their bodies. Primarily look at what their lower half looks like compared to their top half in the off season.
Yep.
And then decide if that's the body that we're going for, because that's what it takes to help get there with that kind of stuff. And so just having these arbitrary numbers, it's hard. We're all going to have them, right? Like I still have numbers that I know the world's not going to end, but if I see it, I'm going to be grumpy that morning. Like, and it comes back to that big mental health piece we've been talking about a lot. And with Jess's like pointed question of what is that going to get you? Like, what are we going to accomplish with that is a powerful way to get away from it.
But I think like if we look at, and it's probably more like Western society stuff, like there were decades where they were essentially telling people that their worth was based on their weight, and that the lower your weight, the more your worth was in terms of your attractiveness and blah, 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 and all this stuff. That like they were also, it was very highly rated as an issue of importance at that point in time. Like thankfully, hopefully, we're growing and learning things. And so we're becoming better in terms of a society and saying, okay, well, maybe lower isn't better, right? So healthy can be a wide range of weights. It can be a whole slew of different things. And it may be very different than what we used to. But the unfortunate thing, I think, is, and I think this most certainly affects more women than men. Men are on the other end of the spectrum. We all want to weigh more. We're like, ah, shit, I hit a low weight. This sucks, right? But women, even though like most of the people I work with know, and they can break it down, there is still that like ingrained feeling of, oh, but weight going up is a bad thing. And it doesn't matter if the clothes fit looser. It doesn't matter if the waist is down. It doesn't matter if they've been getting all these compliments about how great they look all of a sudden lately. None of that stuff matters, because like there is so much history of us tying worth to a scale.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, at a certain point, like I can say that that's bullshit for years and years and years, but like that's hard to work through for a lot of people. You know, like it is like we've just conditioned people to think and to feel that way as a society, and it's done them a great disservice.
Yeah, I mean, when I never mention weight in my clients' check-ins unless they mention it, which a lot of times they will, and I make a pointed note of, I'm mentioning your weight because you mentioned it. And if we are not in a fat loss phase, I'll say so, and they mention something about their weight being up, and let's say we're in a maintenance or a growth phase, I say, if your weight isn't slowly, like, for example, if we're in a growth phase and if their weight isn't slowly increasing over time and we're maintaining things like their waist measurement is the same or they're feeling good and blah, 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 I'm like, you should fire me. Like it's, I'm addressing it in a point of this is what we actually want to see, right? And so like in a fat loss phase, I'll also address things like measurements, adherence, performance in the gym, their visuals. I try to actually not touch on weight unless it's something that they mention or unless it's something that I actually see, as in, hey, it looks like you had this massage and then your scale went up. That's cool because of blah, blah, blah. Like, or that makes sense because of XYZ. And so I relate it always in like an educational, like, hey, this is normal, or hey, we see this because of that kind of situation. And when I have clients or consults or whatever want to do something where it's like, I wish I was 5 pounds less, 10 pounds less, I want to weigh X on the scale, I also ask them, what's going to be different then? What's really going to be, what's going to change? And maybe it's more like, well, I'll feel more confident. I'll, whatever it is. And I'll say, okay, what if we felt those things, but you weighed what you weigh now? And they were like, oh, well, that would be okay. Right. Or like it just opens the doors for that conversation. Because your body weight is a data point and it's good to know, and it's good to kind of like take information from and learn more about yourself and help your coach kind of coach you through various stages. And it gives us more information, which I think is an empowering tool. But only when we see it as such, right? And when we place our worth into a certain number, you're right, it's hard. It's so hard. And it's good to know, like, I'm really glad, Stephen, that you mentioned that, because like people think that they are then bad or like feel some type of way because I wish that I was this weight, or that they have some sort of feelings. Like, I have feelings all the time about my weight, but I also check myself on it, and I get on the scale and I look at it and I get the fuck off, and then I move on with my day. And I, like it's something that we're going to be conditioned for, because that's what a lot of us females were just brought up. Like, I was brought up in synchronized swimming. Like, I had to put on a suit. I was like kind of molded to fit into a box that smaller was better because you could swim faster and throw people in the air and blah, blah, blah. But like, that's not the way that it is. And so like, just being aware of those societal like pressures or just things that are out there, and then checking yourself on that and working through that and communicating that with your coach, through your journey. I think that's an important piece.
I think the idea is it's a data point. It's not the data point. It's not the only data point. And so you just have to put it in its place. And remember also that beauty standards are changing. It's not what it was in the 90s. It's not the Victoria's Secret models. It's not the, I was watching something the other day and they're like, oh yeah, I have like no butt right now. Isn't it great? And I was like, could you, like, who would say that nowadays? Everybody's like, I want all the booty. And you're just like, so those things change, and you can't keep those maybe outdated ideas in with, especially if you have updated standards of beauty and what you want from your body. Because that's really the important thing, is like, what do you want from your body? Not just how do you want it to look, but what do you want it to do? How do you want it to feel?
Yeah. Not getting caught up in like the day-to-day and letting that crush you is like a big piece of it. And I think like with Jess's situation, like now with, you've gotten to a place where previously, like, you wouldn't have gone here purposely, right? Been like, oh, I want to go weigh 150. Like, for the most part, we're going to pull from that. But like you said, where if we're eating more, we're lifting more, we want to have bigger muscles. 2 + 2 = 4. Like, we're probably going to end up weighing a little bit more and things like that. But it happens to everybody, like, for the most part, when we start to see it happen in check-ins, where it's like, oh shit, am I doing something wrong that this is happening? And it's like, no, everything's adding up. This is fantastic. And then just balancing out our plans. with things and making sure we don't get stuck into the routines where we're always letting that crush us and being like, okay, well, now the entire plan has to change. Like Jess has a plan to show up to when her prep starts, knowing that she put everything into her off season, knowing that she didn't let the, whatever time you get on the scale, like that couple of the 30 seconds where you're like, fuck you, scale. It can very easily ruin your entire day. And like, if you can just shut that down and be like, I am checking the boxes, I am showing up, and I'm going to get it done. That's what helps get us away from the mini cut places where like, I didn't pick this topic thinking that we were going to like thoroughly shit all over it, but we essentially did. And here's my favorite part of this.
I gave it like a pebble poop. I didn't thoroughly poop on it.
I mean, okay, so here's my favorite part though. In the research that we were trying to do to find the research, I found an interview. I don't remember who was interviewing him, but with Dr. Campbell. And he talked about they asked him like his favorite recent research. And he brought up the refeed one. He brought up the quick dieting one and something else. And he was like, yeah, it showed this, but like in all reality, the people he took it back to competitors, the people who try to use these approaches for their stuff show up looking terrible. And you can tell. And so like, do you want to be 5 pounds lighter and feel like death? Like, did you win that battle? Or is the scale still coming out ahead? Because you're still giving it all of the power and you don't feel any better about yourself. And so like, I've done diet cuts, 6 months, or diet cuts, mini cuts. And, 6 months later, I don't think they were that much like that impactful, like with things. And so plan things out. I asked clients this morning, I was like, I need to know what life looks like for the next 6 months as we like move through this so that we can figure out where we're going to be. And, just having that foresight with things, we can't just be reactive. Like we really should be playing much more offense than defense when it comes to what we're doing with our bodies.
But I think that's where it really, like, that's the nail on the head, is that we get reactive to the scale, or we get reactive to the situation instead of being proactive about doing what we want. So we're in this place long term, or doing what we want so we, can manage or put on the muscle, whatever your goal is. Like if you're proactive about it on a regular basis, you're going to be successful, typically, much more often than not. It's because we get into that habit of reactivity with our food choices, our stress management techniques, or whatever that impacts our body composition, the choices we make that affect that. That's typically what puts us in the places where we're not as comfortable, or we're trying to push into something like a mini cut. And I would say more often than not, your efforts and your time are better spent looking at how to stop being so reactive in terms of how we handle food, how we handle exercise, how we handle the lifestyle stuff, and being more proactive so that we simply aren't putting ourselves into this position where we feel like we have to react in such an extreme manner.
That was well said.
100%. So
Meds.
Unless you guys got anything else, Jess, that you want to add on to the end, I think we're good to go.
No.
Are you going to go see Seductive Star Wars? Are you and Vic going to see that now?
I'm going to look it up.
I feel like you guys should.
I mean, how long can it possibly be, right? As a show? I mean, who knows? Maybe it's super long. But I've got to come out of it with some good stories, is the way that I see it. So like a good date night, right?
Oh, I think it'd be a great date night for you and Vic.
I'm going to keep.
And then that can be we can do the recap on the next podcast.
There we go. I'm going to look into Seductive Jabba the Hutt and I will report back. No sexy dancing though. Only, what was it?
No.
Erotic we wanted from them.
Erotic.
They already used.
No sexy, only erotic. Erotic is more high class. Sexy, a little bit more in that middle ground. I like erotic. Really, I feel like it's a more artful form.
Yeah. And that's what Jabba the Hutt is. He's an artist. He takes it seriously when he puts those shows on.
I thought you were gonna be like, that's what Jabba the Hutt is, erotic. And I was like, wow, okay.
Yeah, I'm sure somebody thinks so.
It's like the Princess Leia
Right.
vibes, but with Jabba instead of Princess Leia.
I know, but so Jess isn't a big Star Wars fan, but that scene is the same.
I know that. Like,
okay.
I know the basics. I'm not like a super nerd, but like I've seen them.
Yeah.
Right, but I mean, I think she means that she wants to see Jabba in Leia's outfit. That's what Jess wants.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, that's Bob.
It's like the Princess Leia fantasy, but swapped with Jabba.
I'm gonna let you know if that happens because
I
I
love it.
mean, now is Java
I don't
the
want to.
only
You don't
hat?
need to let me know.
Now I have so
I don't
many-
think he is. I think he's one of many.
he's
for
one of
sure.
many huts. So maybe the other
Yes.
huts are into it. So
I'm sure. Of course.
All right.
Well,
On
see,
that note,
that's a difference between not being a human.
People have been like, bye.
I'm
I
gonna
love
hit
this.
stop record.
End it.